This is going to be respiration in 5 minutes. Okay, so respiration is a process here that's related to breathing. Okay, you might have heard of the respiratory system. And the respiratory system brings in oxygen into our lungs and provides oxygen to all of the cells in our body. For this process here, respiration, and that's the main purpose of breathing actually, is to provide oxygen for the cells. So the typical respiration equation, so this is the word equation here, glucose plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide, water, and heat, energy. That is the word equation for respiration. Okay, and below it then we have the chemical equation. So you might have seen this when we were doing food. So glucose, the chemical formula for glucose is C6H12O6. We have oxygen, O2, carbon dioxide, CO2, water, H2O, and also what we should also have here is energy, because energy is being produced down here as well. So the whole purpose of respiration really is to provide energy for the cells, and actually the wastes of respiration are carbon dioxide and water. So if we were to interpret and just provide a little bit more meaning to this equation here, what does it mean? It means if I have one glucose and I have six oxygens, they will react together, so they're reactants, and they will produce six carbon dioxides, six waters, and a small amount of energy. Okay, some of it's lost as heat, and some of it's actually just energy for the cells. There are two types of respiration. You might have heard of one of them. Okay, and that respiration is called aerobic respiration. So actually, aerobic respiration is what I'm seeing right now. Okay, because there's plenty of oxygen in the cell. There's another form of respiration, however, and that's called anaerobic respiration, and that's where we don't actually have the oxygen. So it's like we're trying to produce energy without oxygen, and unfortunately, that usually provides us with less energy. Okay, now you might be familiar with this anaerobic respiration because when you're exercising intensively, think about it. When you're exercising intensively, oftentimes you're trying to get in air into your body as quickly as possible, so your breathing rate will increase. And sometimes your breathing rate just can't keep up. And that basically means here that your body's not getting all of the oxygen that it requires. So it swaps over here to anaerobic respiration because don't forget, you still need energy. So what is happening here then is that we start to produce a waste without when oxygen is not present. This substance here called lactic acid can form, and effectively what this does is it causes a burn in our body, and that's what we associated here with a cramp. Okay, in our body. Now, anaerobic respiration, of course, in animal cells and in humans like us, it's usually never a good thing. But if we're talking about in terms of food production, it's actually a good thing because food production, if it wasn't for anaerobic respiration, we would not be able to have yeast, which of course is really useful here in terms of baking. So all of the bread that you're eating maybe at lunchtime was actually produced as a result of a process here of anaerobic respiration where dough was taken, it was allowed to rise over time, and that rose as a result here of yeast. Okay, where anaerobic respiration happens. So you need to know your two definitions. Aerobic respiration is the release of energy from food using oxygen, and anaerobic respiration is the release of energy from food without the use of oxygen. Okay. Now, of course, aerobic and anaerobic respiration really depend on the type of cell. So, for most human cells, most of the time they are undergoing aerobic respiration. But some cells, for example, as I said, yeast, undergo anaerobic respiration, actually prefer anaerobic respiration normally. Okay. So the products here of a typical respiration process here, if we're talking about anaerobic respiration, for animals, we get glucose is broken down to lactic acid and energy, so a small amount of energy, but this lactic acid we don't want. And for plants, glucose is broken down to ethanol and carbon dioxide. Now, if you know anything about ethanol, you might know actually that this is alcohol, okay? The fancy word for alcohol. So that's how actually we produce beer and whiskey and everything else. And this process here is called fermentation, okay? And we use yeast cells to ferment glucose into alcohol, okay? So that is anaerobic respiration there in terms of producing beer.